You're listening to the Elevate Your Call to Service podcast. Here you'll gain tools to lead proactively, conquer overwhelm, and revitalize your law enforcement teams and your agency.
We're your hosts, Michael and Kathy McIntosh. Mike is a retired sheriff and current division chief in the Denver metro area with nearly 40 years of law enforcement experience.
Kathy is a business and branding expert and a longtime law enforcement wife with a unique perspective on the human side of law enforcement.
Together, we share a powerful blend of practical experience and insightful roadmaps to help you elevate your call to service. Welcome back to the Elevate Your Call to Service podcast. We know that culture doesn't happen by accident. It's something that's made by the way that leaders model. In our last episode, we explored personal leadership and the value of it, how trust and consistency and service begin with what we do personally and how we lead ourselves.
Right.
Today, we're going to turn the lens outward and talk about how we take that same personal discipline and transform it into a collective culture. And we've already said it happens by what leaders model. And all of this made me think of an article that I read recently, and I am a grandma of going to be 6 people pretty soon here.
Right.
And we have a lot of little toddlers around, and I just love parenting articles that give us any little tidbit on how we can navigate things just a little bit easier. But this article said that, it's so funny that some people have to say things out loud to make them true, that the 2 and 3-year-olds don't have any sense of logic whatsoever. And when I try to do some correction of our smallest grandchildren, we've got a terrible 2-year-old and a 3-nager who's about to be 4. But the article said that those age groups don't have any sense of logic whatsoever. And I'm like, well, why did somebody have to write that for me to realize it? That's so obvious, but okay. Yeah. But then it talked about how when we do corrections, it's not about convincing them. It's not about trying to win their approval and cheerlead them enough to where they start to do what we've said. It's about modeling it. It's about doing what we want them to do, because that's what they're going to follow. They're going to follow our words. They're going to follow our voice inflection. They're going to follow our table manners. All the things that we try to impart on our children and our grandchildren all happen not through words, but through action. Right. And I just think, wow, I'm so glad that person wrote the article, but
when you think about it, I mean, that's what we just talked about in the last episode when it comes to that personal leadership. They're following our actions. We're changing culture by our actions, not necessarily by our words. So it really isn't just the toddlers.
Exactly.
I mean, that type of influence is so powerful, whether you're a terrible 2 or, you're in your 60s, like I am.
It used to be a term for the 60s.
Uh-oh. What is it?
I don't know. I don't have it. I'm going to have to think about it. But
I thought you were about to call me something.
No, I might wait till the next episode to come back to you on that.
But I think it's so important when we start to think about that service-driven leadership and the fact that it really does scale. You don't just have employees that follow you along. That shared vision that you have, that leader has, it's really that shared standard of excellence that hopefully becomes long-term. And again, it goes back to building that culture. Now, when I think about culture, I go back to different shifts that I've been on, different teams that I've been on. And really, it's not about what was written in the SOPs, in the standard operating procedures, or in the policies. It's really what that team is doing repeatedly. It's what's repeated that begins to build that culture. And I can tell you that patrol teams, they all have their own little culture. Each patrol team, each investigative team, each jail team, they all have their own little culture. And by and large, that culture is set by their leader, their sergeant, or the person that's in charge of them most of the time. And going back to kind of what we said in the last episode, that's why it's so important that we put the right people in front of our troops to lead them. Because there's going to be a culture that's built in our hope and our desire when we select sergeants and we put them in there, is that they're going to be the person in front of them that's building the culture that we want them to build.
Mm-hmm.
From a command perspective, that just continues to move up, right? Those sergeants should be getting their direction from the commanders. The commander should be getting his direction or her direction from the chief, and so on and so forth. So when we talk about that leadership culture starting at the top, if your organization is running well, if your organization is healthy, you can see from the top to all the way to the line officer that there is a consistent culture throughout, that there's clear vision, and that there's that clear path, and that behavior is modeled, that professionalism is modeled throughout that whole entire organization. And I go back to when I became the sheriff and we had an opportunity to create a mission and a vision. And we first spoke it, and people could describe it, but they didn't feel it. And that was, that wasn't a command issue. It became a culture that we created, and we finally started to see after we modeled it for a while. So, going back through that chain of command, once everybody in the organization really start to understood what that mission was, what it meant, then they started to feel it. And when they start to feel it, then you know that they're moving in the right direction. That from the top to the line, everybody is moving in that same direction.
So you're talking about the difference between communication and modeling, right? So you communicated this vision,
Right.
the line all the way down to the line level. Everybody knew it. Everybody knew what it was. They weren't feeling it. They could describe it. They could say it. They didn't feel it. But the leaders started modeling it.
Right.
And then it started to trickle down. And then pretty soon you started to see it ignite and take root, and people got excited about it. And there's a lot of power in having a shared vision when everybody in the agency knows where you're headed and where you're going. And that didn't happen overnight.
No.
It needed some time. It needed to cook. It needed to stew a little bit, but then it started to take shape because it was also modeled. We've done some episodes recently about clear communication and how important that is.
Right.
But we know it cannot stand alone. It's got to have the modeling activity that goes alongside it, so that there's this congruence. There's this say I'm going to do something and then follow up and actually do it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some consistency, and there's going to be people that walk the walk and they don't just talk the talk. That's what starts to shape a service-driven culture and how it can actually form itself into place and become something that you said is long-lasting and durable.
Right. And you use the word consistency,
Mm-hmm.
and that consistency piece is so critical. It's such a critical component in ensuring that that's what we have. If you want to change culture, if you want to move an agency, an organization, a shift, a team in a direction, it has to be, as we talked, clear. Then it has to be modeled, and then it has to be consistent. Because you can't just model it one day and expect for there to be folks that are going to just automatically get it and follow it. You have to model it and you have to be consistent in it.
Mm-hmm. And then people within the agency start to see it as the agency's identity and
Right.
not just the obligatory tagline that they have to memorize. It's no, this is who we are.
Yeah.
This is our DNA now, and this is how our culture has changed. That's so, so good. Talk to me about how to make that happen. How to start modeling. It seems like it would be second nature, but it isn't. So what kind of tips and tidbits and hope can you give to leaders who are like, I've been saying this for, 6 months and I'm not seeing any difference? What can they do to start pushing that stone forward and start making sure it starts rolling in the right direction?
To me, it boils down to ensuring that those that have influence over the teams, that they're also modeling it, that they're also modeling that communication as it was intended, as opposed to putting their spin on what it is that they thought that they heard. So let me give you an example. I would tell you that one of the complaints that I hear a lot is the lack of communication. And as a division chief, if I communicate something to a commander and then the commander communicates it to the sergeant and then the sergeant gives it to the troops, it's the old
Telephone
game. Mm-hmm. And my message that I delivered to the commander sounds nowhere near the way that it should when it gets to the deputy. So there's a problem there, especially if I'm not modeling that, right? So I have to ensure that the commander is very clear and that the commander can model what it is that the commander needs to model so that the sergeant sees that modeled and then the sergeant gets to model that. That's going from the word, the policy, to the action. So we want the actions to line up to the words. And once the actions line up to the words, then you start to create that culture and where it needs to be. That also requires accountability. And there's a lot of times as you start to move through something that you may not have people in the middle that are bought off on where it is that we should be going. So it's important for the chief to hold the commander accountable, for the commander to hold the sergeant accountable, for the sergeant to hold the deputy accountable. If somebody's missing and not doing that in between, then that message is not going to be delivered the way that it needs to be delivered. Sometimes, depending upon what it is, I've found it much better to get in front of everyone and have that communication, and then they can see it modeled, and then it's a lot easier to hold folks accountable once everybody's heard the same message and had time to ask for clarity around things. So when we have an opportunity to walk through those processes and it is starting to be modeled, but culture is reinforced most powerfully when reflection becomes routine and not reaction.
Yeah, we talked about the need for reflection in our last episode and how you reflect on what you're doing, you reflect on the change that needs to happen, You reflect on how you're going to direct your steps
Mm,
to make it so. And then at the end of the day, you reflect on how you did, right?
right.
And that's what you're talking about when you say reflection has to become routine, not reaction. So communication comes down the pipe. The leader needs to say, okay, how can I model this? How can I be intentional about making sure that everyone sees that we're doing it, that the leaders are doing it? And so that's when that intentionality sets in, that reflection sets in.
Yeah. In that communication piece, there's that phrase, you can't BS a BSer, right?
Right?
And that is really true in law enforcement and in the law enforcement culture. They know if you're gaming them, they know if you really believe that, and they know that by not what's coming out of your mouth, but by what your actions reveal.
Well, and it even to the point of your facial expression and your body language and all of those things. It doesn't have to be, you know,
Right.
what you physically do. It can also be just be the way that your body reflects the way that you're reacting to something.
Right.
So you've got to make sure that everything's in place. Do I agree with this? If I don't, why? And what do I need to do to bring myself along and to be an early adopter and, you know,
Yeah.
put it out the way that it needs to be put out. It's good. That consistency at the command staff level is key.
Mm.
And especially for somebody who doesn't work in a large organization like that, sometimes it feels like maybe the command staff stays hidden and nobody sees them anyway. And, you know, they're up in their office and they're doing their thing. But so why is it that their personal leadership is so, and their consistency in that personal leadership is so critical in creating culture?
I think it goes back to that even though they may think that they're not being watched, they are being watched. Their actions, their words, especially if they're not visible a lot, when you don't have a lot of interaction or you don't have a lot of communication with someone, that makes what they say even more impactful because that's all people have to go off of. So again, going back to aligning their words with their actions, is that true? Is it taking place? And I'll tell you that a lot of people measure fairness, and fairness is a really difficult term because what's fair to me might not be fair to you. But what we can always control is consistency.
And they measure that fairness by...
Exactly. They're going to look at, you were consistent in your response, in your actions to everybody. So is it fair? Some people might think that it's fair, and some people might not think that it's fair. But you know what it is? It's consistent. So you know that their words match up with their actions every time. And that really ensures that a person can be held accountable to what it is that they say.
You know,
that I was just going to say that mixed application of a standard can really start to break credibility much faster than poor performance.
We know we're a sports family. We watch a lot of hockey and tons of football, and I try to watch very little basketball, but y'all love it. And that's great. And I just think about consistency, and, you know, the refs can get in the way of a game or they can just let people play.
Right.
And we always say, we're always screaming at the television saying, you know, if you're going to call that call, make sure you call it both ways. He's over here doing the same thing, and, you know, your flag's staying in your pocket. And these are the kind of consistency things that people see. And it's, I mean, we literally yell at the television for these things. It's important. Consistency matters.
But it's such an important uh, example that you bring up, because if you're a sports fan, most of us don't care how they call it, as long as they're consistent.
Mm-hmm.
As long as both sides know what a foul is and what a foul isn't.
Mm-hmm.
If it's consistent, I'm typically not somebody who's going to be yelling at the television. But when it's inconsistent, that's where the
That's
problem
not
is.
fair.
It's not fair,
Right.
right? And what a perfect example of, reinforcing what we're saying. It's the same thing with leadership.
Mm-hmm.
If we're not consistent in what it is that we're doing, what we're saying, if we're not walking the walk and, talking the talk, so to speak, it really starts to create distrust.
You talked in our last episode about service-driven leadership and the importance of it, but how it plays in rebuilding trust, internal and external trust. And part of that was how teams treat each other is going to be a reflection on how they're going to treat their community. And so that internal versus external trust. If we wanted to build a culture of service-driven leadership in an agency, how can that help us in rebuilding trust within and outside of our organizations?
It starts with personal leadership. That's what we talked about in the last episode. And then it really goes to internal trust, internal accountability, internal leadership. And what I mean by that is it's between the command staff and the rank and file, right? There's that openness, there's that accountability, there's that consistency, that what we say is reflective in our actions. That starts to create that culture internally within the organization. And I'm a firm believer that you have no hope of building that trust, that credibility in the community if you can't build it internally. Because if the folks that are going out into the community aren't feeling that where they're working, then they're not going to display that. They're not going to model that out in the community. And you get really a lot of different ideas, thoughts of what an organization looks like built upon an individual that the community comes in contact with. There's no consistency there.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying one thing, doing another.
Right.
You don't behave that way at home. How can you behave that way out on the street?
Exactly. Yeah.
And I don't mean home. I mean
right.
At HQ kind of home.
Within the organization.
Mm-hmm.
And it really has to start internally within the organization.
I'm just thinking too, like if you're behaving, it's like keeping a secret and you start to live a double life. So if you're behaving one way internally and trying to project something else externally and really being the image focused and caring about what people see,
right,
whether or not it's authentic or not, you're living a double life. You have no ability to be transparent and honest and open. And if somebody were to come in, let's just say somebody from the community comes into headquarters to file a report or do whatever, and they start to see the bickering and the carrying on and the lack of unity, that's going to leave a tremendous impact when they're outside going, wow, that's not at all what I thought I was going to see when I went in there. It's going to leak out.
Right. Yeah. It's so sad, because I will tell you that there are absolutely organizations out there that are leading that double life.
Oh, for sure.
The chief executive officer thinks one way and thinks that the organization is moving in a certain direction. But when you get out into the community, or the community comes into the organization and they're meeting with the employees, they find very quickly that
Not so.
what the CEO thinks and is probably espousing is not the same as what's actually being delivered. And I can tell you, when I was the sheriff, that was a huge fear of mine. And one of the things that I constantly told the the staff is, the old tale of the emperor with no clothes on, right? I didn't want to be that guy. I wanted to be able to say something from a podium, say something in a community group, and know unequivocally that that's what was happening in our organization. And that's so important for an organization to be performing at a high level, which is where we want to be. And it goes back to everything that we've been talking about. It goes back to, along the way, there are a lot of people within the organization that have that personal leadership to lead themselves well. And then there's a lot of people in the organization that are leading well internally, from what they're saying to what they're doing. There's a direct line. There's that correlation that yep, what they say I can believe, and it starts to build that trust. And we've also talked in the past that inherently people want to be a part of something like that.
They do.
When they get up in the morning, it's like, I get to go and be a part of a team like that. And that's what we need to be as leaders, striving when it comes to building our teams.
It's about honesty, being honest with yourself. It's about modeling behavior. It's about transparency. It's about personal leadership. And when we can put those things in place, it starts to squash cynicism, where the troops might say, yeah, you guys have been saying that for years and nothing ever happens about it. Right. We've all heard that.
Yeah.
If you're hearing that in your organization, it's a personal leadership problem.
Right.
More than anything else. It's also a way that every level of leadership can start to buy in, because if the top leaders are genuinely excited about something, that really does trickle down. It really does have that ripple effect. And it can help us as larger organizations deal with the competing pressures of politics or budgetary needs or operational limitations. You can kind of overcome any storm when all of that comes together, that personal leadership, that service-driven leadership, that honesty comes together and everyone's aligned. So your core purpose is solid and steadfast. It becomes really an unshakable foundation to where, the storms can come, but the ship stays solid.
Right. Yeah.
What's the challenge for this week? What do you have for our listeners today on how to apply all of this?
So we've talked a lot about kind of two terms, right? And the first one is model. We have to model. Everyone in our organization has to ensure that their words are aligned with their actions. And then where needed, I would just say that we need to reintroduce the agency's mission statement. What does the mission statement mean in my role? How do I support that? How do I ensure that I'm carrying that out on a daily basis? And does that action model what it needs to comparative to the mission statement itself?
That's good. How does this impact me, and how can I play into fulfilling
Yeah.
the vision and the mission of the organization. Are there ways that we can measure success?
Well, so from a data standpoint, no.
Probably not. And that's okay.
How are we going to measure it? We measure it through retention. When people want to stay a part of that team, a part of that group, there's a little bit of a measurement every year when there's shift bid and there's people that may not be the hours that I want to work,
but I'm not working for that guy.
But I'm not working for that guy, or I'm gonna go to graveyards
so I can work for this other guy.
So that I can work for that guy. Because that person models what it is that we should be. That person lets us empowers us to do our job. And it comes down to that culture, right? What does the leader of that team, what kind of culture have they set? And do they kind of allow me to be the service-driven leader? To me, that's how you really start to identify that you're a part of a culture that is moving in the right direction.
Because those core activities that are so important are repeated and modeled and sustained. It's the difference between policy and presence.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. That's so true. That's such a great term, because that's really where we want to be, right? Going back to, being out on that critical incident where the leaders, the executive command staff shows up, and it's not to
micromanage, right?
It's not to tell people what it is that they need to be doing. It's for no other reason than to say, hey, we're here. What do you need? What kind of resources? We're here to walk alongside you, because those can be, they're not called critical incidents for, or they are called critical incidents for a reason, right?
For sure.
And there's a lot to those.
Well, we want to thank our listeners for joining us in this episode as we've talked again about personal leadership and changing the culture of an organization and shifting toward more service-driven leadership policies and mindsets more than anything. And you've heard today how personal leadership starts to shape the credibility of our command staff, and how the disciplines build solid cultures. That's a big deal. And again, we just want to say it happens one step at a time. This is going to be a slow process, but the sooner you begin, the sooner you'll be able to start seeing some progress and moving forward in it. We hope that if this resonated, if this brought any tidbits or support to our listeners, that they will share it with their staff, with their command staff, and again, just use it as a vehicle to start the conversation, because the trust that we build inside an organization becomes the trust that a community starts to feel from the outside. So, we just hope you'll keep leading with clarity, that you'll serve with purpose, and that you will serve your people.
Yeah.
Thank you. Ready to build a stronger team, improve your reputation, strengthen officer safety, and recruit top talent? Visit us at leleaders.com and schedule a call with us today. We'd love to discuss how our coaching programs, workshops, and keynote addresses can help you build proactive leaders in a reactive profession.
In the meantime, if you like what you've heard today, we'd love your 5-star review on Apple Podcasts.